All right, listener name, buckle up, because today we are diving headfirst into a future that might be a little closer than you think, one where humanoid robots are practically as common as, well, cars on the street.
It's definitely a future that's capturing a lot of imaginations.
Absolutely. We've got a whole stack of reports and articles here, and they all seem to be pointing in the same direction towards this market that's just, well, ready to explode. We could be talking about an industry that surpasses even the automobile industry in scale and impact.
It is a pretty fascinating prospect when you consider the sheer scale of the change we're talking about.
Exactly. I mean, just think about it right now. The global automobile industry, that's a giant, right? It's valued at something like $2.8 trillion.
A massive industry, that's for sure.
But then you look at the humanoid robot market, and it's tiny by comparison. Like we're talking about 1.55 billion. I mean, bridging that gap seems almost impossible, right?
At first glance, it might seem that way. But when you dive into the projections, the story gets a lot more interesting.
Oh, okay. So what are we talking about here?
So the humanoid robot market, it's projected to grow at a compound annual growth rate.
Okay, hold on. You just threw out that KGR term like everyone knows exactly what it means. I gotta admit, for those of us who don't analyze market trends all day, could you break that down a bit?
Right, of course. So KGR, it's basically a way to measure how much an investment grows on average each year over a certain period. So in this case, we're looking at how much the humanoid robot market could grow every year over, say, the next decade.
Okay, so we're talking about yearly growth potential here. Got it.
Exactly. And the estimates are pretty impressive. We're looking at a KGR anywhere from 15.57%, which is already significant, to a whopping 70.4%. That's a huge difference compared to the automobile industry, which is only projected to grow at around 5.66%.
Wow, okay. You're right, those projections are impressive. So if we're talking about those numbers, does that mean that by, let's say, 2035, this market could be worth somewhere between like, what, 79.6 billion and a mind-blowing $243.4 billion dollars?
You got it. That's the potential we're looking at.
Wow. Okay, so we've got this incredible projected growth, but what's actually driving this huge boom?
Well, there's not just one single thing pushing this growth. It's more like a perfect storm of a bunch of different trends converging all at once. We've got major advances happening in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and sensor technology. All of these technologies are getting more and more sophisticated, but also, importantly, more affordable, which makes robots, well, more capable and much more accessible than ever before.
So we're not just talking about those clunky robots from like old sci-fi movies that can barely move around. We're talking about robots that can learn and adapt and actually interact with their environment in much more complex ways.
Exactly. Companies like, for example, you've got Tesla with their Optimus robot and Figure AI. They're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible. We're talking about robots that can navigate spaces designed for humans, they can pick up and move objects with real precision, and they can even learn from their experiences.
Okay, I see. But how does this translate to the real world? Like beyond the wow, cool robots factor, where do they actually fit into our lives?
That's where it gets really interesting, I think. One of the major things driving this growth is just the massive demand for automation across pretty much every industry you can think of. Healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, even retail.
Yeah, it seems like everywhere you look these days, industries are struggling with things like labor shortages and just needing to find ways to do more with less. And robots seem like they could be the answer.
You hit the nail on the head. In 2023 alone, we saw a 25% jump in robot installations globally. That's a pretty clear signal that businesses, they're really eager to jump on the automation bandwagon. And humanoid robots, well, they're a big part of that picture. They can step in and do the jobs that are dangerous, repetitive, or just plain difficult for humans to do.
I can definitely see the appeal, right? Robots, they don't need to take breaks, they don't get tired, and they can work in conditions that would be, I mean, frankly, dangerous for a human. But let's be realistic here. Building a robot that can, like, walk and talk like us, that's got to be insanely expensive, right?
You're not wrong. The cost of developing and manufacturing these robots, it's still a major hurdle. But here's the interesting part. The cost of the actual hardware, the nuts and bolts of the robot, it's steadily going down, which means they're becoming more accessible to a wider range of companies, even smaller businesses.
So it's like a classic supply and demand situation, right? The technology gets better, the production gets cheaper, and suddenly more businesses, maybe even individuals, can start using these robots.
Exactly. But it's not just about cost. The potential uses for these robots, they're expanding rapidly, and that's being driven by both the advancements in technology and the growing realization that, hey, these robots can actually be incredibly useful.
So it's not just about robots taking our jobs. It's about robots working with us, helping us do things better and safer, and freeing us up to focus on tasks that really require, human skills.
That's a great way to put it. And as we go deeper into this topic, we'll explore some of those specific applications and the really remarkable impact they could have on all sorts of industries.
Well, I'm already hooked, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's break down those key ingredients that are really fueling this robot revolution. We've got this, like, perfect storm brewing, but we need to understand how all the pieces fit together, right?
Absolutely. We need to look past the hype and get a clearer picture of what's really shaping this future.
Okay, so we've got the tech advancements, the demand for automation, the dropping costs of the hardware. What else is feeding this robot fire?
Well, one thing that often gets overlooked is the aging population.
Mm.
As people live longer, the need for elder care is just skyrocketing. And humanoid robots, they have the potential to provide companionship, help with everyday tasks, even provide some level of medical monitoring for seniors, which could really improve their quality of life and, take some pressure off caregivers.
That's not something I had really thought about before. It's not just about robots doing jobs that humans don't want to do, but about filling these crucial roles that are becoming harder and harder to fill with human workers.
Exactly.
And we can't forget about the money, right? The investments. Governments and private companies are pouring, billions of dollars into robotics research and development. They see the potential for these robots to transform industries, address those pressing societal needs, even create entirely new markets.
They absolutely do.
We're talking serious money here. Figure AI, just as one example, they snagged a whopping $675 million in funding from big names like NVIDIA and Microsoft. And then you've got companies like 1X, they secured 23.5 million. It seems like everyone's betting on robots these days.
It's definitely a hot area for investment, and those investments are crucial. They're what's speeding up the innovation, allowing companies to build more sophisticated robots, conduct the research that needs to be done, and, bring their robots to market faster.
So it's not just about building a cool robot anymore. It's about showing that your robot can actually solve real world problems and that, there's a way to make money with it.
Exactly. And that actually leads us to a really important point. Despite all this excitement and the investment pouring in, getting funding for robotics projects is actually getting tougher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, investors are becoming much more discerning, much more careful. They want to see a clear plan, a solid research direction, and most importantly, evidence that these robots can actually deliver what they promise.
So it's not just about throwing money at any project with robot in the name anymore. Investors are looking for tangible results, a real path to profitability.
Exactly. The days of just handing out blank checks, those are over. Robotics companies, they need to show that their robots can solve real-world problems and that there's a return on investment.
Makes sense. It's like any new technology, right? There's that initial wave of excitement and investment, and then things settle down and the focus shifts to, practical applications and a sustainable growth.
Precisely. And this shift towards more focused research, that's actually a good thing. It's what's going to separate the truly groundbreaking robots from the ones that, well, just fade away.
Okay, so we've got the tech, the demand, the money, and this need for more targeted research. But something tells me it's not all smooth sailing from here. What are some of the roadblocks that are slowing down this robot revolution?
That's a great question, and one that we're definitely going to dig deeper into in the next part of our deep dive. But to give you a sneak peek, some of the major hurdles we're going to be tackling include things like uh, technical limitations. Are people even ready for robots in their lives? Social acceptance, and something we can't ignore, the need for ethical guidelines.
Ooh, yeah, those are some juicy topics. I'm definitely looking forward to unpacking those. But before we jump into those challenges, let's shift gears and talk about the potential here. Where could these robots really make a difference in our lives? What are the applications that have people so excited about this technology?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
Yeah.
move from the market forces to the actual real-world impact. I think you might be surprised by just how many possibilities there are.
All right, lead the way. I'm all ears. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of humanoid robots, listener name. Before we went away there, we were digging into all the factors driving this huge growth in the robotics industry. Now I'm excited to explore, where these robots could actually fit into our daily lives.
Yeah, there are just so many potential applications, it's hard to know where to even start. But maybe the most obvious one is healthcare, right? It's an industry that's under so much pressure with aging populations and just a constant shortage of staff.
It really does seem like the perfect fit, right? You've got these robots that can provide that, round-the-clock care and attention, which is so difficult and expensive to do with human workers alone.
Exactly. Imagine robots helping, like elderly individuals in their homes. They could provide companionship, help with those daily tasks that get harder as you age, like cooking or bathing. Even monitor their vital signs and alert medical professionals if there's a problem.
Yeah, it's like having a live-in nurse, but without needing to, sleep or take breaks. It could be huge for elder care. It could really allow seniors to live more independently and with more dignity.
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond elder care, humanoid robots could play a big role in hospitals and clinics too. They could help nurses with things like lifting patients, moving them around, delivering medications, even keeping an eye on patients' conditions. That would free up the human nurses to focus on the more complex and emotionally demanding parts of care.
That's a win-win for both patients and healthcare professionals, right? Creating a more efficient system, but also a more compassionate one where robots and humans work together to provide the best care possible.
Exactly. And the possibilities, they really go way beyond healthcare. Manufacturing, that's another industry where these robots could be a game changer. I mean, robots are already common on assembly lines, but humanoid robots, they could really take things to a whole new level.
I can see it now, right? Robots working alongside humans, handling those repetitive, tough, physically demanding tasks, or even those jobs that require, like, extreme precision.
You got it. Think about things like welding, painting, putting together tiny electronic components. Humanoid robots could do all that with more accuracy and speed than their human counterparts, and they don't get tired, they don't get injured.
It's all about optimizing the whole production process, right?
Yeah,
Making it safer, more efficient, and let's face it, more cost effective.
right. And this collaboration, it could even lead to a resurgence of manufacturing in developed countries. As robots take over those tasks that are now often outsourced to countries with lower labor costs, we could see a shift back to local production. That could boost economies and create new jobs right here.
That's a really interesting point. It's like robots could actually be a catalyst for, bringing those manufacturing jobs back and creating this more sustainable and resilient global supply chain.
It's definitely within the realm of possibility. And the potential, it doesn't stop there.
Hmm.
Logistics, that's another area ripe for disruption. Imagine robots in warehouses. They could pick and pack orders, load and unload trucks, even make deliveries.
Okay, now I'm picturing a robot dropping off my latest online shopping order. This is like sci-fi becoming reality right in front of us.
It is. And it's not just about the convenience factor, right? Robots could really streamline the whole process, make it faster, more efficient, and cut down on those annoying shipping errors. Plus, they can work 24/7, which could really reduce delivery times and maybe even bring down shipping costs.
That's a win for both businesses and customers for sure. And it's not a stretch to see these robots expanding into like other customer service roles. I could see them greeting customers in stores, answering their questions, maybe even offering those personalized recommendations.
Absolutely. And think about the language barrier.
Yeah.
You could have a robot that switches between languages seamlessly, making it so much easier for businesses to connect with a global customer base.
It's like having a universal translator and customer service rep all in one.
Exactly. As we keep exploring these possibilities, I think it's really important to remember that we're not just talking about replacing humans with robots, right? It's about augmenting human capabilities, opening up new doors, and finding solutions to some of the really big challenges our world is facing.
That brings us back to that initial comparison we made between robots and automobiles. Both of these technologies have the power to completely transform how we live our lives, but they both come with their own unique sets of challenges and things to consider.
Yeah, it's a fascinating parallel to think about. The automobile, it revolutionized society. It gave us this freedom to move around, to explore, and it really fueled economic growth. But it also, it brought its share of problems like pollution, traffic jams, this dependence on fossil fuels that we're still struggling with today.
Exactly. So the question is, can we learn from history? Can we really harness the power of these robots while avoiding those pitfalls that so often come with these world-changing technologies?
I think we can. And this is where those challenges we touched on earlier, those technical limitations, the whole question of social acceptance, and the need for clear ethical guidelines, this is where all of that becomes so important.
Okay, let's dig into those challenges then. Let's start with the technical side of things. What are some of the hurdles that engineers and, robot developers are still trying to overcome?
Well, one of the biggest ones is dexterity.
Oh,
Human hands, they're incredibly complex, right? I mean, we take for granted how versatile they are, but replicating that level of dexterity in a robot, that's incredibly difficult.
so even though robots are, getting better at doing those repetitive tasks or handling objects precisely, they still struggle with those things that require fine motor skills, like, I don't know, tying your shoes or folding laundry.
Exactly. And even in those tasks that robots can do pretty well, they often need very specific programming and a very controlled environment to work in. Adapting to those unpredictable, messy situations we encounter in the real world, that's still a major hurdle.
So a robot might be able to navigate like a perfectly mapped warehouse floor, but put it on a crowded street or in a messy house, and it might have some trouble.
Precisely. And that leads us to another big technical challenge: perception and decision making. Humanoid robots, they need to be able to perceive their environment, take in all that information, and make, smart decisions based on what they're seeing and hearing. That requires some pretty sophisticated algorithms, powerful sensors, and a lot of computing power.
So it's not just about building a robot that can see and hear. It's about building a robot that can understand what it's seeing and hearing and then make judgments based on that understanding.
You got it. And that's where AI comes in, artificial intelligence. It's the key to building robots that can learn and adapt and make those decisions in these, complex, unpredictable environments. But even with all the amazing progress we've made in AI, there's still a long way to go.
It feels like we're still in the early days of AI, right? Just
Mm.
starting to explore what's really possible.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this feel so exciting. There's just so much potential for breakthroughs and discoveries, but it also means we have to be realistic about what current technology can do, right?
Okay, so we've got the technical challenges, but what about the human side of all this? What about, social acceptance? Are people actually ready for robots to become part of their everyday lives?
That's a great question, and there's no easy answer. People's feelings about robots, they're all over the place. It depends on their culture, their experiences, how robots are portrayed in the media, all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen those sci-fi movies where robots, they go rogue, they try to take over the world. Those images, they stick with you.
They do. And those fears, even if they're often not based in reality, we need to take them seriously. If we want people to accept these robots, we need to build trust and understanding.
So it's about education, being transparent about how this technology works, and having open and honest conversations about it.
Exactly. And it's also about design. Building robots that are, aesthetically pleasing, something you actually want to interact with, not something that feels threatening.
Right, like the difference between, I don't know, a cute, helpful robot like Wall-E and a scary Terminator-style robot. The design makes all the difference in how people perceive them.
Precisely. And that brings us to that third challenge we mentioned, the ethical guidelines. As robots become more and more sophisticated, as they become more autonomous, we need to make sure their development and how we use them, it all has to be guided by some strong ethical principles.
Okay, so it's not just about building robots that can do cool things. It's about building robots that do the right things.
Exactly. We need to be asking some tough questions here, like, who's responsible when a robot makes a mistake? How do we prevent robots from being used in ways that are harmful? How do we make sure robots respect human values and rights?
Yeah, those are some big questions, and I don't think there are easy answers.
There aren't, but they're questions we need to be grappling with now before robots become so integrated into our lives that it's, well, too late to go back.
So being proactive, anticipating the potential problems, and coming up with solutions before they become, full-blown crises.
Exactly. And it can't just be a few people in a room making these decisions. We need to involve everybody in this conversation. Ethicists, philosophers, policymakers, industry leaders, the public, everyone.
It's like we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
Navigating uncharted waters. And the choices we make now, those are the ones that will determine where this whole robot revolution takes us.
I agree. It's a time of incredible excitement, but also a time of great responsibility. And as we keep exploring all these possibilities, we need to keep those challenges, those ethical questions, front and center. Because ultimately, the future of humanoid robots, it's up to us. It's in our hands.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to one of those big anxieties people have about robots, that fear of job displacement. We've touched on it a little bit, but I think it's worth digging into a little more. What's your take on how robots might affect the job market, for better or worse?
It's a totally valid concern and one we need to be honest about. As robots get more advanced, they're going to automate some jobs that are currently done by humans. There's no way around that.
So there will be some job losses, that's inevitable. But is it going to be like, this mass exodus like some people are predicting? Are robots going to take everyone's jobs?
I don't think so. It's important to remember that technology, it's always been changing the job market. The printing press, the automobile, the computer, the internet, they all led to some people losing jobs in certain areas. But they also created all sorts of new opportunities, even entirely new industries.
So you're saying the robots, it's just another chapter in the story of like technological evolution that's been going on for centuries.
Exactly. And we've adapted to those other changes, and I believe we'll adapt to this one too.
But this time, I don't know, it feels different somehow. More intense.
Maybe it's because robots have the potential to automate those tasks that we always thought were like uniquely human. Things like driving, taking care of the elderly, maybe even performing surgery.
Right. It's like they're moving into territory that we thought was off limits.
That's one way to look at it. But you could also say that robots are actually freeing us from those tasks, giving us more time and energy to focus on things that are more, well, more meaningful, more fulfilling.
So instead of being afraid of robots taking our jobs, maybe we should see it as an opportunity to pursue work that's more creative, more focused on, what makes us human.
Exactly. And this is where education and training becomes so important. We need to make sure people have the skills they need to thrive in a world where robots are, increasingly common.
So it's not just about learning how to code or program robots. It's about developing those uniquely human skills that robots just can't replicate.
Precisely. Things like critical thinking, being creative, problem solving, emotional intelligence, being able to collaborate effectively. Those are the skills that are going to be in high demand in this new world.
It's almost like robots are, pushing us to become more human, to really cultivate those qualities that make us special.
I like that. There's definitely some truth to that. As robots take over those jobs that are, repetitive or dangerous or just plain boring, we'll have more space to focus on what truly makes us human.
Okay, so we've covered technical limitations, social acceptance, ethical guidelines, and the impact on jobs. But there's one more piece of this robot revolution puzzle that I want to look at, and that's the potential social implications. How could living with robots change our relationships with each other, how we build communities, even our understanding of what it means to be human?
Wow, that's a deep question, and one that's really hard to answer with any certainty. I mean, we're still in the early stages here. It's tough to predict how this is all going to play out.
But we can at least, speculate.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's important to do that, to have these open and honest conversations about the potential good and bad that could come from robots, so we can make smart decisions about how we want to live alongside them.
So where do we start? What are some of the potential social impacts that we should be thinking about?
Well, let's start with some of the potential positives. Robots. They can help us tackle some of those big challenges facing society right now. Things like our aging population, the shortage of healthcare workers, and the need to find more sustainable ways to live.
Can you give me some specific examples of how that might work?
Sure. Imagine robots helping elderly folks in their homes, providing that companionship, helping with those daily tasks, even monitoring their health.
Yeah, that could be huge, especially as we see more and more people living longer and needing extra help.
Exactly. And in healthcare, those robots could step in and help fill that gap in nursing and caregiving. It could be a huge help in hospitals and clinics.
It's like robots could help us create a more caring, more supportive society.
That's the hope. And when it comes to sustainability, robots could play a key role in developing and actually implementing those renewable energy technologies, reducing waste, even cleaning up pollution.
So they could help us live in a way that's more in balance with our planet.
Exactly. But of course, there are some potential downsides we need to consider too.
Like what? What are some of those concerns?
Well, one worry is that robots could actually make existing social inequalities even worse.
Oh, how so?
Well, if the benefits of these robots are not distributed fairly, they could end up widening the gap between, the haves and the have-nots.
So it's not just about developing the technology, it's about making sure everyone has access to it and that everyone benefits from it.
Exactly. And that's where government policies and, social activism come in. We have to work to make sure that robots don't create a more divided society.
So access and equity, those are key. What other concerns are there?
Another big one is privacy. Robots, they're basically data gathering machines, right? They're collecting information about our habits, our preferences, even our emotions.
And that data could be used to manipulate or exploit us.
Exactly. And it's not just the robots themselves, it's the companies that build and operate these robots. They're going to have access to a huge amount of data about our lives.
So strong privacy laws and safeguards, those are going to be essential to make sure our data is protected.
Absolutely. And we also need to think about the psychological impact of, sharing our lives with robots. Some people worry that they might make us feel less human, more isolated, even, replaceable.
It's like those sci-fi stories where the robots take over and humans become obsolete.
Yeah, that might be a bit extreme.
Yeah.
But the underlying concern is a real one. We need to think carefully about how robots could affect our sense of self, our relationships with each other, even our place in the world.
It's a lot to think about, but these are conversations we need to be having.
I agree. The future with robots, it's not set in stone. It's something we create together through the choices we make, the actions we take, and the conversations we have.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of humanoid robots, listener name. We've talked about the incredible potential, the challenges that come with it, and the huge impact they could have on society.
It's a complicated topic full of both, amazing possibilities and a lot of uncertainty. But I think one thing is pretty clear. The future of robots, it's tied directly to the future of, well, humanity itself.
Exactly. And that kind of brings me to this question that I've been thinking about this whole time we've been talking. What does it even mean to be human in a world where robots are becoming more and more advanced, more and more, well, human-like?
That's a big question, one that philosophers have been debating for centuries, right? But these robots, they definitely bring a whole new layer to that discussion.
It's like robots are holding up this mirror to us, making us really look at our own values, our strengths, our weaknesses, and what really makes us different, what makes us human.
I think you're onto something there. As robots start doing more and more of the things that we used to think only humans could do, it forces us to rethink our definition of what it means to be human.
It's like we're being challenged to evolve, to focus on those things that robots can't copy. Things like creativity, empathy, our ability to love, that sense of awe and wonder that we have.
And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe robots are actually pushing us to become more human, to really cultivate those qualities that make us unique.
Okay, I can get behind that idea. It's not about robots replacing us, it's about them making us better. But how do we make sure that this evolution, it benefits everyone, not just a select few? We talked about social equity, but the stakes just feel even higher now.
We do. We have to be really deliberate about how we bring robots into society.
Right.
We have to make sure that the benefits are spread around, that everybody has a chance to succeed in this new world.
So it's not just about the technology, but the whole social and economic system that surrounds it, right?
Exactly. We need to think about access to education and training, what's happening with income inequality, and, could robots make some of those social divisions even worse?
Yeah, it's a lot to consider, but I feel like we're really just starting to explore this,
Yeah.
right? There's so many questions, so many different paths we could take.
Absolutely. And that's what makes all this so fascinating and so important. The future with robots, it's not written yet. It's something we create, with the choices we make, the things we do, and the conversations we have.
So listener name, we'll leave you with this. The rise of these humanoid robots, it's not just some technological event. It's a real turning point for our culture, for how we think about the world. It's a chance for us to really ask ourselves, what does it mean to be human? To think in new ways about our relationship with technology, and to build a future where robots and humans, we can live and thrive together. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.